Stress is just a word. There is no stress. There are stress reactions, generally a result of us taking something personal or fear that an outcome that we need to happen in order to feel significant, relevant, good enough is not happening or will not happen. Horizontal thinking is past or future thinking, right? So the roles that we play, like you as a barber entrepreneur, is not who you are.
That's what I do.
Correct. Who you are is what you bring to that role. And so the ego plays a big part in creating who we think we are. People get angry with themselves and others because a lot of times when people are angry, they're really processing at the lower levels, it's fear and sadness. But they know when they get angry, when we're afraid, we want control. And anger is one way that people get control again. The biggest fear people have, and the reason why they get paralyzed in the decision-making process, they're afraid of making a wrong decision. And they said, scientists have proven that humans are more afraid of uncertainty than they are of physical pain. We didn't learn how to think effectively. We got taught what to think. The other thing we didn't learn how to do is we didn't learn how to appropriately and effectively grieve those things in our lives that we consider as losses. And excuse my language, but we didn't learn how to let shit go.
Okay, well, here we are. Thank you so much. It's been a while since our video call. It's been what, like 2 months? Oh,
yeah, something like that. I think, I think it was just before the summer. I think it was
just before summer. Yeah. But yeah, in the summertime, you know, the weekends we've been here and there, so it was kind of hard. So well, thank you so much, Walter Aguilar, right?
Aguilar, yes.
So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Well, thanks to Clarence / Slava, you know, for introducing us.
Yeah.
That was a big call. Yeah, he did, right? So I'm very happy to have you here. So I think you know what I normally do. I let the guests to introduce themselves instead of me talking about you. So there's nobody better than you than talk to you know about yourself. I know it's going to be hard to tell you. Can you briefly, you know, just tell us a little bit about you, but as brief as you can with information that you think you know people should know about you. So go ahead.
First of all, my name is Walt Aguilar. I'm a son of a Guatemalan immigrant mom who came to Canada for a better life, and I grew up here in Vancouver, in East Vancouver, Little Italy area. I went to Britannia High School, and so I grew up here, and I had an opportunity to play sports and to have an upbringing. Had a Hungarian stepdad for a while, and then essentially grew up with a single mom, and then had an opportunity to experience North American life. And but one of the things that really happened was that as I was going through this and playing sports and what have you, I was looking for. I was always been looking for wisdom. I've always had this idea that I had something in me. I didn't know what it was, and didn't go to university. I did a little bit of substance addiction counseling at VCC, and then I was able to meet somebody who became my wife in my early 20s, and then did some work as a team leader at a probation school, and that's were these young teens that were on probation from the law, right? And so that was an adventure, and then got into sales. And
sounds like challenging.
Yeah. So it was challenging. I mean, you learn a lot about yourself. It's that old saying: is you don't know how many holes are in the boat till you go out on a storm.
Yeah.
So when you're around with kids that are at risk, you find out a lot of things about yourself. And then we also were fostering at-risk teenagers through a group called PLEA. And so this is the fostering, the PLEA led to me being a team leader. And and through that, we had an opportunity one day to actually, there was a little baby, a little Persian baby named Amir, and we we were asked if we were willing to do it on a short-term basis. And so we went to a place in Kitsilano, and there was this boy and little baby, and I picked him up, and I was there with my Latina mom and my wife, and I picked him up. And as soon as I picked him up, he smiled at me. And I looked up. My wife was giving me the old, well, if you think so. And my mom was, no, because they didn't know. They thought he had cerebral palsy. Didn't know what the issue was. So we took him home, and the short term turned into 20-year adventure.
Oh my goodness.
And so what happened was they figured out that he was only supposed to live till 10 years of age. He made it to almost 21.
Wow.
And part of where my journey went on was that once I left the probation school, I went back to what I was really good at, was sales. So I would do a lot of different types of sales jobs, and because it's a great equalizer. If you don't have like education, sales is always a great equalizer. Because as long as you're personable with people, you're committed, and because I played sports, right? So it's all performance based, right? So sales, you earn what you can make, right? So, but what happened is my wife was telling me that our boy was starting to get more and more needs, and so she suggested that I need to do something from home. And she was on the board of DDA, Developmental Disabilities. And she had a coach present to them one day, and she said, in the future, they're going to need coaches. And
working from home, so that way you could take care of the baby.
So I could help. I could support. No, she's still at home. She was full time.
Okay.
But she needed more support, right? So when she talked about coaches, at the time, back in 2014, the only thing about coaches, they called them life coaches, right? So she said they're going to need coaches, right? So I actually started thinking about it. And then I realized that, I looked at a statistic that couples with special needs children have a 70 to 80% chance of divorce.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened was I thought, hey, I'll be a coach for special needs couples, right? Because I figured out, the old thing, if you can't teach what you don't know. So I thought, no, I know how to be married. I know how to take care of a special needs child. And so I found a place called IPEC in New Jersey, New York, and the only problem was that it was $10,000 plus in U.S. dollars.
Oof.
And at the time we were just making ends meet, right? So what happened is they did an information thing in Kitsilano, and I went there, and they said, well, you think you might want to be a coach? I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They said, well, just call New Jersey. So I called them up, and they said, it's because I went and inquired about student loans, and they said, yeah, we have student loans, but you have to be an American citizen, right? And they said, and I said, oh, no, I'm not, I'm from Canada. They go, tell you what, email the CEO. So I emailed the CEO, and he said, Walt, send me a 400-word essay on why you want to be a coach. So I wrote it, and sure enough, he came back to me. He said, you know what we're going to do? We've never done this before. The school will lend you the money. It'll be, wow. This is how much you need to put down. This is the interest rate. You won't get certified until you actually pay it. Next thing I know, I guess I'm on my way to being a coach. And while I was going through there, then they came up with this program called Core Performance Dynamics. And it's basically it's an energy performance model, because IPEC is all about a thing called energy leadership, that there's 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of awareness, 7 levels of confidence.
Before you break that down, because I have some questions related to that. I don't know, you want to keep going with the story?
Yeah, I'll tell the story.
I have questions about that.
Okay, so I went and did there, and I was one of the first 25 in North America to do that. And I happened to have my first client be ex-Vancouver Canuck, 2 years removed from the Vancouver Canucks. And I had just started going through this program, a sports performance program.
Can we mention his name?
Yeah, Jeff Tambellini.
Jeff Tambellini.
Yeah. So we went through there, and what happened is that that was my very first client. And then, because this core performance, when the 25, a lot of them were golf people, and they were going to take it to golf there. But I grew up in East Van. I played hockey, so I thought, I'm taking it to hockey. And so I just decided as a coach that I just wanted to start coaching people. And so what happened was that's what I did. And what happened was that as I was finishing up my certification, I was working for a company, a garbage disposal company, as a retention manager. They fired me 2 weeks before Christmas.
Oh my God.
And
How convenient.
it was heartless, right? So I said to my wife, I'm done with jobs. I'm going to be a coach. That's what I'm going to do. And sure enough, from then on, I've never worked for anybody else.
Good for you, mate.
And so what happened is that I was able to, and to this day, I do it all via Zoom in my bedroom of our house in Surrey. And I have clients all over the world. And as well, what happened is that IPEC, once they had all of us there, they decided that core performance dynamics was so great that they have core transition, core leadership, and core wellness. And so they had us 25 come back and do teleclasses. And because I couldn't just find athletes, I was coaching everybody on anything. When I first started, I would coach anybody on anything at any time for any price. Mostly I just got testimonials. I didn't even get paid. I just wanted to coach.
Well, that's how we start, right?
Yeah.
Pretty
So
much.
when I went back, I actually went and got, I actually went and taught in these different niches, and they didn't pay. We had a choice. We could either get cash or we could get it in assessments. And so I didn't ask for the money. I got the assessments. These assessments, I can figure out where somebody's emotional intelligence is, how they handle stress, how they shift out of it, how much stuff they got from the past. So I just got a bunch of assessments. So I just went out into the world with all these assessments. And what I found is that my closing ratio on the assessments was 80 to 90% of people that took the assessment would start coaching with me. I didn't know. I just started doing it. And so to this day, I work in the performance, transition, leadership, and wellness. I've actually helped people make it to the NHL. I've helped leaders make multi-million-dollar decisions on their businesses. I've walked people back from suicide. I've had couples of 30 years that have had infidelity find their way back to each other. So for me, in a sense, what I discovered was my ikigai, my reason for being. So this is where this was all developed in the last 10 years or so. During that 10 years, for 5 of those 10 years, I was a special needs dad. My son passed 5 years ago. And during that time, I was still coaching. But during those 5 years, I did not want to get famous. I had no desire to go fly anywhere or do any talks or anything. I would be coaching from the bench at Children's Hospital, broom closets, wherever. If my son had to go to the hospital, I would go with him. I would work the graveyard shift.
Wow.
I did whatever. And once he passed, things have just kind of been growing. So I'm living proof that if you find your reason for being, then money will follow, clients will follow, and that I have a simple motto. If it's got flow, it's good to go. And if it doesn't have flow, it's got to go. So my life I've spent looking for flow. And that's how Clarence connected us. And this is where we are now.
Okay. Well, I know, because I know when we talk, you give me even more information about yourself. So I know just only talking about your life, your journey, we could spend hours here.
Oh, yeah.
And it is, yeah. So what was your biggest surprise, the biggest surprise for you, when you first learned what coaching really was? Or actually, let me rephrase that. When did you feel like you were actually like coaching?
Well, one of the things that I've learned, right, that when you find your reason for being, it's always been there. So I've always been coaching, even in the past.
Without knowing.
Well, I knew that I was coaching, but I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And one of the reasons why is that I teach that your ikigai, your reason for being, is not something outside of yourself. It's always there. So I always knew, remember I told you when I was younger, I knew that I had this vision. I actually visualized myself talking to smarter, like educated people and like really influential people, and I always visualized myself being their advisors. For some reason, I always had this idea that I could befriend these people, and I would be doing that. And I didn't realize that it was going to be coaching, because I work with people that run multi-million-dollar business, are in the NHL. I coach people that are more educated, richer, better looking, younger. It doesn't really matter, right? But I think that one of the things I realized about coaching, that coaching is actually, that's the most surprising thing, that it's less about me and it's more about who I'm with. And it's less about my ego. And because what I found, even as I joked about that, as I'm getting older, my clients are getting younger, because younger people and older people have incredible BS detectors.
And can you repeat that?
Younger people and older people have a stronger BS detector.
Okay.
Right? So they can sense when someone is not authentic, when they're not real. And so what I've learned is that in order for me to be effective at what I do, I have to be myself and nobody else. And I had to do the work as to who the heck myself is, right? So, but I find that I've also had to learn how to communicate what I know in a simple way, because what I know isn't of use to anybody else unless they could understand it and apply it to their lives. So in order to do that, I had to simplify it for myself. And that's why if it's got flow, it's good to go. If it doesn't have flow, it's got to go, which is why my company is called Power versus Force.
Say it again, the name?
Power versus Force.
We will put it in the description, all the information.
So power is when you are in the moment, speaking and acting your truth, knowing that it's not the truth for everybody, and understanding that other people have different filters in which they view the world, and then being open enough to be able to contemplate things that you may not agree with or even believe in. In other words, having a growth mindset. That's when you're in your power. When you're trying to force things, or when you're trying to be somebody that you're not.
Why you think is that? I mean, when we try to force others, I guess it's because sometimes we want to convince them of our truth. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And okay, so how does it work?
well, what happens is that because sometimes, quite often, our ego, we have this thing called an ego.
Yeah.
And who
24/7.
And who people think they are, the ego can only exist in the past or the future. It can't exist in the present moment, because this is where we are, right? And the past and the future exists in our minds. We are not our minds. We are energetic beings having a human experience of cause and effect.
That's what you told me that you call horizontal thinking?
Horizontal thinking is past or future thinking, right? So the roles that we play, like you as a barber entrepreneur, is not who you are.
That's what I do.
Correct. Who you are is what you bring to that role, right? And so the ego, right, it plays a big part in creating who we think we are. Because if I was to ask you, Ricardo, who are you? You would go back into your memory, tell me where you were born, kind of like I did to you.
Yeah.
Right? You wanted to tell me, oh, who are you? Well, I had to give you something.
Yeah.
So I told you where I raised, where I played hockey. I told you about my mom. I told you, right? I had to give you something.
Yeah.
Because if I really told you who I am, you and your viewers would not be able to comprehend it. And it would be very difficult for me to really truly explain it in a way that would fit this format.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I'm still having a hard time thinking or understanding what exercises or what we should do to go from what we think we are to what we really are. Well, how do we shift?
Well, I think that the very first exercise I give all my clients is an exercise called Watch the Thinker. If you've ever read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle,
Yeah, I read it a long time ago. Yeah.
he suggests watching the thinker. And when you can do that exercise by just taking a deep breath and just noticing your thoughts. Awareness is nothing more than noticing.
You mean create consciousness of the moment?
Well, you bring you
Awareness of the moment.
Awareness and consciousness, because we talk about 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of awareness. Most people don't know what awareness is and what consciousness is. I asked a 15-year-old girl, and she told me, oh, it's awareness of awareness. A 15-year-old girl knew what consciousness and awareness is. You ask any adult, and they'll have a hard time.
Yeah, it's not easy to describe.
You asked me what you can do. Well, just take a deep breath and just notice your thoughts. But when you're noticing your thoughts, don't judge or label them. Because in order to judge or label something, you need a past or you need a future. You need to compare it to something. But when you're just watching your thoughts, it'll be kind of like in the 70s, they used to have these vans, the shaggin' wagons, and they used to have these bay windows, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember as a kid, you can actually, as you're driving, you could watch these cars going by. So if you can watch your thoughts just going by and not judge or label them, there comes a point where those thoughts will stop. And then a thought will come, hey, I wonder when my next thought's going to come. But if you're watching your thoughts, then who is the thinker and who is the watcher? Then you start to create that little separation, right? Because you start to realize that your mind is not who you are, right? So that's when you start doing that, then that's where you start progressing.
I see. So your mind, it's full of thoughts that you've been creating with your past and whatever you're expecting from the future.
Yes.
But not necessarily is who you are. And
No.
I mean, if I think about it, things that I used to think or say in the past, now I think completely, sometimes even the opposite.
Correct.
Because I grew in a different direction of what I thought. And yeah, so I'm not the same person I was in the past.
And here's what's interesting, though. The neuroscientists, they say that the average person has 70,000 thoughts per day.
I think I have like 150 million.
But here's the interesting part. 80% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had yesterday.
So we're repeating ourselves.
And of those 80%, 70% of those thoughts are negative.
Oh God. Well,
So what happens is that, you remember the old vinyls when
Yeah.
it skips?
yeah.
I'm going to age myself. Dr. Hook, Sylvia's mother. I remember when I scratched it and you kept hearing Sylvia's mother, Sylvia's mother. I've had to change from that analogy because my clients are getting younger. Now I talk about the DJ loops, right? Because they don't understand, right? So the DJ loops, right? We start looping. And when we start doing that, we start to, a depressed person has depressing thoughts. A happy person has happy thoughts that are looping. And what's interesting is that they say that the average person only makes conscious choices 5% of the time.
Wow.
95% of our choices are based on our subconscious. And our subconscious stores our memories in the form of feelings.
Okay, I have a question. I'm gonna stop you there before keep going. So, just correct me if I'm wrong. Normally, we make decisions based on experience. You know, sometimes we just jump to the pool. We don't know if this half empty or half. Sometimes we have to make decisions, but most of the times, I guess we based those decisions in the experience that we had in the past. So we compare. Oh, I've been in this situation before, so this is what I did. So now I'm gonna do the same thing, or I made a mistake. Now I'm gonna change. But we base our behavior in the present based on our past. Is that wrong, or is that still okay using that, or what?
Well, here's the thing.
What would you suggest?
It's not a matter of right or wrong. The biggest fear people have, and the reason why they get paralyzed in the decision-making process, they're afraid of making a wrong decision.
With unknown.
Yeah. There's Pema Chodron, who did a seminar on smiling at fear. she was talking about being on a plane and reading the newspaper, whether it was the Washington Post, whatever. And they said, scientists have proven that humans are more afraid of uncertainty than they are of physical pain.
Wow.
And one of the things that happens, right? Susan Jeffers, who wrote The Fear, who's got a PhD on fear, she said that at the core of our fear, we're afraid that if the worst thing happened, we might not be able to handle it. So, right or wrong are constructs of our ego, right? Because it's the past and future,
I see.
right? If you think about this, you came from Spain. Your family might have immigrated here. You've gone through a lot of different difficult situations. You've handled them all. Sometimes more effective than other times, but you've handled it. How do I know? Because you're still here. If you hadn't handled it well, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would have jumped off a bridge, or you may be on the east side and drugged out somewhere, but you did. You've handled it. You're an entrepreneur. You're a successful entrepreneur. You have a podcast. You're curious. You're moving. So where's the fear coming from, right? It's your ego, right? And the ego, I love Eckhart Tolle's, one of his many definitions, as the unobserved mind. Hence, watching the thinker, right? Becoming more aware and more conscious of what is actually going through your mind, what you're actually feeling. And when you think about stress, there is no such thing as stress, because two people can have the same experience, but one could go into fight, flight, or freeze, and the other one could remain totally calm.
And why you say there's not stress? Why? Because we have different experiences, it means that there's not a stress.
Because stress, right? It's just a word. The late Wayne Dyer in his presentations would challenge his crowd. He'd go, here's a bucket, take it. Tomorrow when you come back the next morning, bring me back the stress. There is no stress. There are stress reactions.
Oh, okay, I see.
Right? And stress reactions are generally a result of us taking something personal or fear that an outcome that we need to happen in order to feel significant, relevant, good enough is not happening or will not happen. So we go into self-protection. That's where the catabolic contracting energy is. And when we start going into past horizontal thinking, our body starts to release adrenaline for anxiety, right? Fear, cortisol, right? Which is where you think some bad's going to happen, right? And we start to contract. That's where hockey players hold on to a stick a little tighter.
So we're like in defensive mode constantly.
We're in survival mode, right? That's why in that energy, we see things as good or right, bad or wrong, right?
And it blocks our decisions and our energy. And
it blocks our creativity, our intuition, our gut feelings. And we are looking for a way to keep our head above water.
Just enough to breathe and keep
going down, 2, 3. And that's why people get angry with themselves and others. Because a lot of times when people are angry, they're really processing at the lower levels, it's fear and sadness. But they know when they get angry, when we're afraid, we want control. We want to have control. And fear is one way that people anger is one way that people get control again. Even to this is that if you look at any time that you've had breakups with people, quite often before people know that, and even look at couples, it goes from disliking each other to resenting each other to contempt. They don't even like the way the other person breathes. They create this catabolic energy of conflict, so it makes it easy to separate.
So yeah, we were talking. You mentioned before about the 7 levels of consciousness, and at the same time when we talked a couple of months ago, you mentioned a formula that it says performance equals potential minus interference. So I want you to explain in whatever way you can all these things, because it sounded very, very interesting when you explained to me.
It's at the very core. So IPEC is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. They're out of New Jersey, New York. There's a guy named Bruce Schneider, who was the founder, who developed what's called energy leadership. IPEC has a thing called energy leadership, which is based on Bruce's work, which is the premise that there's 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of engagement, and 7 levels of confidence.
Is that related to the chart that you showed me?
That is the chart.
Okay, so if it's okay, I can share that with the viewers.
As long as we gave credit to IPEC.
Oh yeah, whatever.
And, yes,
yeah, of course.
And that it's their work. It's their copyrighted work.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
as long as we give them credit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, these 7 levels of consciousness, 7 levels of awareness also represent 2 types of energy. Remember I said that we're energetic spiritual beings having a human experience. We're always emitting energy, right? And there's 2 types of energy. There's anabolic, which is the expanding light energy, which is found in creativity, love, anything that is positive sort of idea, right? Mm-hmm. It's an expanding energy, right? It's light. Catabolic represents a contracting energy. That's why it's called catabolic, right? Catabolic, it's contracting, it's heavy, and it's the energy that works against us when we're trying to be successful, right? And so this idea that there's 7 levels, because when I showed you this chart, in the very middle of this, all these different circles is me. Mm-hmm. And I always like the old Austin Powers, the little mini me.
Oh, yeah.
That's why it's called a self-perception chart. It's who we think we are. And quite often it's driven by our ego, our past and future, right? So the first 2 levels are all about the catabolic energy. It's about where we, at level 1, where we feel like life is happening to us, or level 2, where we're angry at life, ourselves, right? And that's where we go into the fight, flight, or freeze. And as we go up the energy levels, what happens is our awareness starts to expand, our engagement, our confidence, right? To the point where when we're at the higher levels, we actually experience a high level of creativity, intuition. We feel connected to God, to universe, or whatever it is that you believe, mm-hmm. right? I believe it's God, but other people have other mm-hmm. different beliefs, right? So these 7 levels are there because when you get to the 7th level, you also remember that exercise about watching the thinker?
Yeah.
At the 7th level, it's kind of like those 6 levels. Imagine those 6 levels being like your favorite sports car. What would be your favorite sports car? If I could say, you know what, I'll buy you a sports car right now, what would it be that had 6 gears on it?
I would say a Pontiac Firebird.
So imagine it has 6 gears in it, right? So the energy levels are like the 6 gears. It's not about good or bad. It's about every gear serves its purpose, be it more effective or less effective to whatever you're trying to do. So if you wouldn't start up in 6th gear because you would need to get going first, right? So those gears would all have, right? And what would happen is that when you got to the 7th level is where you realize you are the driver. Mm-hmm. And that you can actually shift to whatever gear you need to for whatever purpose. That's the magic of energy leadership, right? So when you asked me prior to this, what do you do? Well, I said I've been called a life coach, a mental performance coach, transition coach. I give a mindset coach, a leadership, a wellness coach. In the end, I'm an energy shifter. I teach people how to shift their own energy so that they can be more effective at what they do. This equation of performance is because the roles that we play in life is not who we are. It's what we do. Whether our performance in that role is high or low has to do with our ability to make choices in the moment, which is acts as our potential in the moment, which is our knowledge, skills, and talent for that role, and our ability to connect to creativity and intuition. If we do that in the moment, the athletes call it the zone. A lot of people in business call it being in the flow, because we have full access to our creative minds, our creativity. When we're in that moment, we're actually not thinking, we're being. And so what happens is that performance equals potential minus interference. The interference comes from 6 different levels, 6 different influencers, which again are also part of the core performance program. It's your spiritual, your mental, your emotional, your social, your physical, and your environmental. These are all areas that it can influence your energy, either more anabolic energy or catabolic energy. And what happens is that when it's catabolic, it's usually a stress reaction. And it creates horizontal thinking. Energy cannot be destroyed or created. It can only be shifted or transformed, right? So if you're in the zone and you're having a day where everything is just intuitive, you're creative, everything's great, the minute you take something personal or you attach to an outcome that doesn't, right? And you get thrown off and you get under stress reaction from one of these areas, you start to create that horizontal thinking. Thinking takes energy. You know those days where you've been physical, no, you haven't been physical, but you've been thinking a lot, and by the end of the day, you're exhausted.
You're exhausted, yeah.
Because thinking takes energy, and energy has to come from somewhere, so it comes from the present moment, right? So what happens is that the more thinking you do, you go from a 10 being in the zone, 9, 8, 7, and as you start going down, your level of awareness starts to get less, right? Your confidence starts, your level of engagement starts to shift from easy action to you trying to force it.
I see.
Right? Or you start to go into that fight, flight, or freeze. Right? You either get aggressive and try to get control of it because you're feeling like things are getting out of control, or you actually freeze like a deer in the headlights and you hesitate because of fear, or you actually leave, or there's another one where you fawn, where you become a people pleaser. Right?
I know some of those.
Yeah. So what happens? We all know that. We've all been there. Like I'm a coach and I still get in those, right? Because that's part of the human experience. So performance equals potential minus interference. And interference, when we talk about it, another way of saying is distraction. If I asked you right now to take 2 fingers right now.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Gonna put me on test.
And put it into your ribs.
Okay.
Nice and tight. Now I want you to, for the rest of our interview, I want you to have that in there, right? Stop. I'm not going to ask you to do that.
Okay, like,
but it's a distraction, right? Like you start thinking, "Holy cow! Can I tell him I'm the one that's interviewing?" Your thoughts are going, "Do I really have to do this? Where's he going with this?" Right? Because all of a sudden you get distracted.
Yeah,
that's what stress reactions do. They distract us from the present moment. Because nothing happens in the past or in the future, because the past are just memories of the now. The future are just expectations. We think it's going to be better or worse than it's going to be. Because remember when we had that talk in the spring, we're in the future right now and it's still the now.
Yeah.
And it's neither better nor worse. It's becoming really interesting because we're having these great talks. And by the end of the time we're done, we'll label it something. Hey, that was a great experience, or I can't believe that was a waste of our time. But right now, as we're just experiencing it.
Yeah.
So that performance, whatever role you play, whether you're a husband, whether you're a student, whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're an entrepreneur, is all the same. That's why for me, it doesn't matter whether I'm coaching a multi-million dollar business owner or an NHL player or a 13-year-old lacrosse player or a husband or wife. It doesn't really matter because it's the role.
At the end of the day, we're not that different, right?
No,
probably it doesn't matter.
We're all wanting to be effective in our roles. However, right, we all have things from the past, right? because there's two things we didn't learn how to do effectively. We didn't learn how to think effectively. We got taught what to think.
Okay.
Right? We got taught it based on feelings and logic, punishment, reward, right? Get with the program. We went into school. They taught us how to what to think. And when we went into higher education, we get taught how to be critical thinkers, how to take a point of view and get all the evidence and win your argument and debate. What we didn't learn how to do was to trust our instincts, our gut. Why? Because our parents didn't know. If your parents were immigrants like mine, they didn't have time to focus on that. They had to put food on the table.
Yeah, I mean, they're not immigrants because they never moved from Spain. But it's exactly what you're saying. They didn't know what stress means. They never heard the word. Not even heard the word about being what is it called, depressed or anxiety. They never learned those things. They were just carrying with with their task just to provide food and a roof, right?
Values. Look at this. Values are principles we live by. Their values were based on security and survival.
Yeah, that's it.
Achievement and accumulation. They didn't understand thriving. The idea of finding your reason for being was not what they were focused on. Right? They were focused on being able to allow their lineage to continue on. Have kids that could marry, have an education, have a better life than they had.
Yeah.
They didn't know any better. Nobody ever taught them. I didn't know any better. Right? So this whole idea of values, they're right. So we didn't learn how to think. The other thing we didn't learn how to do is we didn't learn how to appropriately and effectively grieve those things in our lives that we consider as losses. We didn't learn how to effectively forgive ourselves, forgive others, accept ourselves, accept others, accept situations. And excuse my language, but we didn't learn how to let shit go. Right? So where did all that stuff that we didn't let go get stored? But in our subconscious. And feelings are the result of the energy, catabolic energy. You ever have those days where you're not necessarily under stress, but life still feels a little heavy?
Yeah.
It's because you're carrying the past in energy as feelings.
I have a question with that. You say so many things that now I have lots of new questions, but one specifically, you say right now we never learn how to forgive others or have to forgive ourselves. Is it possible to describe what forgiveness means or is? Or in your opinion, what is forgiveness? I know it might sound a stupid question, but I want to describe what that is and see why it's easier to forgive others. Like, for example, if you do something to me that I wasn't happy with, at some point I might be able to put myself in your position and understand why you did that to me. And then once I understand, I can, sympathize or something, and it's like, oh, okay, then, and I let it go. So I can say, I forgive you, right? And now we just go with the friendship. But when it comes to myself, how do I know I'm forgiving myself or I'm looking for an excuse to justify what I did? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? How do you forgive to yourself? How do you forgive yourself?
Well, I think that...
Instead of making up excuses. That's what I had to do.
Well, I think about it, right, is that when you are talking about forgiveness, right, forgiving yourself, okay, who's forgiven who?
Yourself.
Remember watching The Thinker.
Oh, okay.
If you're watching, your consciousness is watching your thoughts and you're not judging or labeling, right?
I see.
There's nothing to forgive.
There's nothing to forgive. Why you have that pain inside?
It's because your ego is still your inner critic. A lot of people have this thing called an inner critic. We call it the gremlin. Remember the movies? There were all these nice little things.
Yeah.
Your inner critic has good intentions, but it actually shows up. It's kind of like that friend we had when we were growing up. That was our friend, but he was always really negative. And you know he had a good heart, but he was just constantly negative and always shooting us down, right?
Yeah.
If people really had a friend that was like their inner critic, they would probably get into a fight with them. Because like you're just being an a-hole. Like what do you do? Like, but yet, how many times have we done something and we said, "How could you be so stupid?" We're actually calling curses on ourselves.
Yeah.
When you take a deep breath, right, and you start to realize that your inner critic has good intentions, it's kind of like if you had an employee who was a good employee, he just wasn't good with customers. You can go and give him another role. Instead of him being at the front collecting cash, you maybe get him to do all the sweeping and what have you.
Yeah, good luck with that.
No, but what I'm saying is that you learn how to reassign energy, because when you think about it, the definition of one of the analogies that I like about the lack of forgiveness, right? It's like drinking poison and hoping that other people die.
I see.
Right? So
that's an interesting analogy.
When you are not forgiving yourself, you think that you're forgiving other people, but really all you're doing is rationalizing their behavior, and you will never feel comfortable to be vulnerable with that person ever again, because you haven't truly forgiven. Like there's two things we don't really understand. We don't understand unconditional forgiveness, and we don't understand unconditional love, because those two things are spiritual things. I'm a big Jesus believer, so I have an understanding of forgiveness, and I have an understanding of unconditional love. And I love what Eckhart Tolle says, that words have their limit. They point to something, but they can't describe it. They're not the essence of what that is. And what's really interesting is that if you put a little quantum physics into it, in any given moment, every possibility exists. There's a version of me here where I offend you. There's a version of you where you offend me, right? But there's also a version of us where we're just so connected and we are so in line that this great wisdom appears. Every possibility exists, right? When two people who are totally in the moment conscious and not thinking about how they're looking or trying to be something that they're not, information gets exchanged. And there's things that I may need to hear from you and things you may need to hear from me. But because we're both in the present moment where everything is possible, our consciousness can choose the highest and best version of ourselves to show up.
I see. Wow. I have another question, another thing that you mentioned before about finding ourselves, who we are. I want to know your opinion about this. So we use social media for our businesses. It's a great tool that we have to use it, but I see something like very, very, very often, which I think is extremely dangerous for what we're talking about here. I see a lot of people creating fake lives or fake identities just to capture people's attention, either because of the nature of their business or because they want their business to look like what they're not, but that captures attention, views, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, is getting people's attention and probably, money or increase the business. Don't you think it's kind of dangerous that people are faking their lives so much that eventually they might not even remember who they are anymore?
Well,
Isn't it like a negative? Isn't it playing in a negative way, like playing that way? Like faking your life so much and renting things, to make that you have like a luxury life when you don't. And at the end of the day, I feel like some people might find like completely lost, and I don't know who I am anymore, unless they reinvent themselves.
Well, you're also making an assumption that they knew who they were in the first place.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe that's their way of searching. I love one of the things that Eckhart Tolle always says, right? Is because when you think about this idea of self-mastery, right? Of mastering who you are. Most people don't realize that it's not an outcome. It's a process. That's why you could spend your whole life and never really know exactly who you are, because it's not an outcome. And so what he says is that one way you could try to find out who you are is by figuring out who you're not.
Okay, that's a good way to start, I guess.
Yeah. Well, because think about this, because and I know that for me, because I have a belief in something bigger than myself, right? It makes it easier for me in some ways, and it keeps me humble, right? And so if somebody is doing all these things on the internet and what have you, it's that old saying: be careful what you want, because you're liable to get it. Right? Because how many people have we know that have gotten wealth or have gotten, right, and then they end up killing themselves?
Yeah.
Because they realize that wasn't it. Right? So sometimes people have to do things to find out who they're not. Right? And if you have people that have a growth and learning mindset, then quite often they will continue to keep adapting and changing. That's why a curious mindset is part of a growth mindset. So this idea of who we think we are, I think it's a question that it's through the ages, right? If anybody tells you they know what it is, there's a good chance they don't know what it is. And even the stuff that I'm talking to you about, a lot of this information is not my information. I've learned it, but other people, right? Like even the whole transformational industry, if you look at Ecclesiastics, King Solomon talked about there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that we talk about in the transformational world, there's nothing new. We just have found more effective ways of talking about it, teaching it, assessing it, and it's constantly getting more and more effective. But there's nothing new under the sun.
I see. We just be more precise then.
Yeah, we're just getting more effective at doing that, right? But even to the point now where AI, there's Generation Z are now using AI for their coaching, right? So there's so much information. It's not a matter of the information or the knowledge, right? Right. So, but AI can never duplicate our connection in person. Social media can't do that, right? Our connection, our intuition, our collective ideas that come, the information that gets exchanged. That's part of the energy exchange.
Oh, well, we have to get rid of technology for a year. I think so, to get back to that. I'm going to read the question because it's a little bit long, and I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
No worries.
So I found very powerful when you said to me, I think in our talk, we don't attract what we want. We attract who we are being. Can you explain what that means for somebody who feels stuck in repeating negative patterns in life or relationships?
Yeah. When you think about who we are, think about it from a quantum physics perspective. Everything that is matter at the subatomic level, right? If you were to go with a microscope, they go and they look at 99.999% waves and 0.0001, I don't know the exact number, but it's 0.001 particles. And waves are just energy, right? So when you think about it, everything that becomes solid is a vibration. So when we are these energetic spiritual beings, our vibration also represent the 7 levels that we're at, right? So when you think about frequency, right? Think about the radio, on your car. What's your favorite type of music? What would be?
Oh, I have a lot. Hip hop and jazz are my favorite ones.
Okay, imagine being at the highest level of vibration as hip hop and jazz. Like you either kind of be bopping to it, or you'd be like, oh yeah, it's nice, right? What would be the worst kind of music you'd like to not hear? Metal or?
I still like it, but I don't know.
Country or just even, I don't know, Baroque?
I would say probably that kind of like a hardcore electronic music. Not electronic music itself, but the hardcore type. Yeah, I don't.
So whatever frequency you had is what music you're going to get, right? So, for example, if you start your day and you stub your toe and then you get mad at yourself and you think, oh, how could I be so stupid? I'm going to have a bad day. You've now set the frequency to that catabolic. So you're going to find often that your day will reflect the frequency that you set.
That's me every other day.
So what happens though, but here's the interesting part, right? You ever notice that when you go to a party and you're at the lower frequency or the lower energy, it's more contracted. People seem like to stay away from you. And yet other times where you go and people there and you're in that higher frequency and you're joking and laughing, you seem like you're like people are gravitated to you because you got that jazz, that hip hop, and people that like jazz and hip hop come talking to you.
Yeah.
Right? So the thing is that if you go through life feeling that the world is unsafe and that people are going to take advantage of you because they have in the past, there's a good likely that you're going to attract people that are going to take advantage of you, right? Because that's your vibration, right? So in the same way that when they talk about the law of attraction, you don't attract what you want, you attract to your being. I'll give you an example. There's a guy that wasn't scoring any goals, and I told him, so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start to visualize yourself as a 50-goal scorer and visualize scoring goals, but also visualize how you're going to walk into the actual dressing room. So the next game, I want you to walk in with that vibration that you're already a 50-goal scorer. That, right?
I see.
And he went out and had a 5-point game.
Oh, wow.
A hat trick and two assists. Why? Because he changed his frequency. Yeah. So and here's the thing is that the other thing is think about what Albert Einstein said, right? If you keep doing what you've always done and expecting a different result, it's a epitome of crazy.
Yeah, literally.
Most of us are crazy at some point in our lives.
Yeah, we're scared of taking different actions, but we're expecting different results.
Yeah. Well, think about this. If you're the type of person that has dated 3 different people and you get the same outcome, but these 3 people don't know each other and the only common denominator is you, right? Is it really about them or is it about you? Right? And that's why if you want, especially for people that are needy and they need somebody else, like there's a lack, right? They're going to be constantly looking to fill that lack, right? So what they do, I've often taught, right, that in any relationship, the person that has the least attachment has the most power. Because I don't need you to make me happy or unhappy. That's my responsibility. And because of that, I could get up and walk away and be okay with it. But if you needed me to stay here for you to be happy,
Yeah.
then you would do whatever you had to keep me here.
You helped clients in diverse areas, from saving marriages and helping athletes, to reach the NHL and things like that. Do you see a common pattern? Even though a marriage has nothing to do with an athlete, do you see a common pattern in people that, that why they behave the way why we behave the way we do?
Yeah, I think it's it has a lot to do with the ego and not knowing who they truly are, and spending too much time in the past or the future. When you think about what happens with people, is that when they are not showing up as the highest and best version of themselves, is because they're taking something personal based on their own self-perception, or they're feeling that they're not getting something that they think they need in order to feel fulfilled, significant, worthy, enough. They see something outside of themselves. So quite often when you're in a relationship, people go outside of the relationship because they're having perception that they have needs that are not being met. When people are trying to perform in a performance-based career, they start going outside of their lane because they need a certain outcome to happen, which is really what gives rise to a lot of our own personal suffering, right? Because those Buddhists back east, they laugh at all the Western people because they say that we believe that pain is inevitable, but suffering is an option.
I see.
They say that a lot of our unnecessary suffering is because we don't accept this moment as is. We wish that it was the way it used to be or the way it could be. So the non-acceptance creates the suffering. So when we do that, we start to behave in ways that our vibration goes, right? Where we start to create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. We go and start to make decisions that are outside of our value system, or we start to create beliefs about what we need. And I've been married for 33 years.
Wow. Can you give us an example? Because I know you work with marriages. Can you give us an example of how you helped a couple that they were going through, whatever they were going through?
Yeah. Remember what I said is that people go outside of their marriage when they have an unmet need. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I like to really look at is I don't like to coach from the top down, like somehow, right? Yeah. I've been married for 33 years, but I also left my marriage for 3 months when I had a special needs son because I had FOMO, fear of missing out. I thought there was another life where I had a child that wasn't special needs and someone else. And so I stepped out. So how I helped a couple was there was a couple that were married for 30 years and they owned their own business and they worked in business together. And when one was at work and the other one was at home, they were not meeting each other's needs. And one of the wife met the needs from a neighbor. Mm. And so what happened was that they reached out to me and I offered to coach both of them together. The wife was open to it, but the husband wasn't. He was done.
Oh, wow.
And what I was able to do with the wife was to help raise her level of awareness and consciousness. And she realized that it wasn't the neighbor that she wanted. It was the need that she had for intimacy, for feeling heard, for feeling seen, for having a sense of love and belonging. And what had happened over the 30 years, they became great business partners, but they lost the intimacy. And everybody thinks that intimacy is just about sex. It's not just about sex. It's about being within an umbrella of a relationship and still growing as individuals. Khalil Gibran, who some people know, he wrote a book called The Prophet. John F. Kennedy quoted him. If you ever heard that quote, ask not what you can do for your country, but ask not what the country could do for you, but what you can do for your country. Mm-hmm. He said that in a marriage, we're like separate shores and we have the water between us. So one of the things is that when you have couples have needs. And not only couples, we as human beings have needs. We have a need to feel seen, heard, and have a sense of love and belonging. When that starts to go away, then we go searching. That's why one of the challenges for a lot of men don't realize this is that if you start to start another relationship with someone, and that becomes your place where you're intimate, you could lose what you have at home. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to help people understand and be more aware that what they are needing is not outside of themselves. In other words, I teach people that other people are not there to make us happy or unhappy. They're there to make us conscious and aware of what wounds in ourselves we haven't yet healed, or what areas in our life we still need to grow in. My happiness is not my wife's responsibility. That's my responsibility.
But it affects you as well. I mean, it affects us, how people, people that we like or we love, how they behave towards us.
But I had a hereditary chief friend of mine ask me, what do you think your wife's supposed to teach you? And without even knowing, it came out of my mouth. Acceptance. Acceptance. Why? Because when I stepped out in my marriage, my wife accepted me back fully and 100%. I don't know if there's a lot of women that would be able to do that. And so what my learning was, I needed to learn how to accept her and realize that why I left in the first place. I felt there was something missing. But had I left and never came back, I wouldn't be the man I am today. That's how powerful that is. And I've also learned patience, because patience is the absence of a story that doesn't serve us.
Say that again?
Patience is the absence of a story that doesn't serve us. I'll give you an example. I like to watch hockey. When my son was alive, he would have these things called punamis, where he'd be a really mess all over the place. My wife would need me to go and lift him from his bed into the bathtub, clean him up, and then bring him back, because he was getting a little bit heavier as he was getting older. I remember the first couple times I would go, and every time I sat down, this happens, right? Because she just yelled my name. She didn't even tell me it was a yell. And then one time I started to become really aware. This isn't 1980. 80s. I can actually put the game on pause. And it's not every time. So I decided that whenever she called me, I would put it on pause. And when I went there, I would say to her, I'm here to help. And I would go and I'd enjoy my time with him. That was my time with my son. And every time I'd be taking him out of the bathtub, we'd go by the door and he'd slam the door. And it would let me know he's still fighting. And then I told my wife that I would put him back into bed, but we weren't going to talk about his punami. I was going to go back to my game. And my wife used to always freak out every time he banged the door. And I used to find it exciting. The week before he passed, he was not able to do that anymore.
Oh, God.
And when I went and did that, and I didn't hear the banging, intuitively I knew we were coming to the end. But I learned, and something else I did as well. It's called remembering the future. I said to myself, you know how sometimes you hear of people wishing they could have one more moment with that person after they passed?
Yeah.
I remember during that process, I said, there's going to be a day when my son is not going to be here. We're going to be at his gravesite, and I'm going to wish that I could change one more diaper, one more carry into the bathtub. And so I went there, visualized myself into the future, and I felt what that would feel like. And then I came back.
Wow.
And from that moment on, I looked forward to those punamis. And I finally had that moment where I was at the gravesite, but I didn't feel like I needed to ever change another diaper because I had done it.
You've done it already.
I changed every diaper that I needed to do, and I enjoyed every moment of it. And on the last week, when he wasn't even conscious enough to do that, I knew it was time. But I considered it a privilege every time to have been the carrier of the punamis because, and don't get me wrong, I had a cell phone once where I put it on the edge, and anytime you put it on the edge, he would grab it, throw it into the water. So there was moments, but even he taught me about patience because how can I be mad at him?
Yeah.
I put it there.
Yeah.
There was a time when we're listening to The Voice and he would be sitting beside me and all of a sudden he'd decide to smack me in the groin, right? I couldn't get mad because that wasn't his fault, right? It's that old, remember boxing, protect yourself at all times?
Yeah, yeah.
You have a special needs child, protect yourself at all times. That's not his responsibility, that's mine. And the same with relationships. Protect yourself at all times. If you are not aware, right, there are times where you can be vulnerable, times when you can't be vulnerable. Even your own spouse may not be. What I've learned is you got to be careful about who you're vulnerable with. Because if you're vulnerable with the wrong person, they could get disappointed with you, steal your conversation. They could give you unsolicited advice. Next thing you know is you feel like you got hit in a 2x4 and you think that everybody is unsafe. But it's not true. You just weren't discerning about who you wanted to be vulnerable with. Protect yourself at all times, right? So there's a lot of lessons. So our life is the school. Our awareness allows us to learn the lessons. But in order to do that, we need to not have the ego telling us what we need or what's right or what's wrong. We need to observe. We need to be where life is happening, which is the now.
Well, amazing. Thank you for sharing the story. I'm pretty sure it's not easy, to bring back those memories?
Well, you know what? It's one of my greatest fears I had that I was going to forget him when he passed. Mm-hmm. What I realized is I can't forget him. And every time I talk about him, it's a privilege because he was my first real teacher of mindfulness and of being in the present moment. And even his passing helped a young Persian boy not take his own life. So he's actually helped other people, even the way that he fought. He was only supposed to live till 10. He made it to almost 21. A young boy that was thinking about taking his own life, I gave him an exercise. Give me 3 things you're thankful for. One day he gave me 2 things and he said, I'm thankful for your son Amir. I go, why? He goes, because he had so many needs. He was only supposed to live till 10. He fought till he was 21. I don't have those needs. Maybe I could try a little harder. To this day, that kid is still here. The way that my son lived helped somebody else fight just a little bit harder.
Wow.
So yeah, no, I don't ever find it hard talking about him. It's a privilege.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that story. Okay, so I don't know if briefly, because we're getting close to the end, can you describe the difference between therapy, coaching, and mentoring? Is there any difference?
Yeah. Therapy, from my understanding, is always trying to go back to the point of pain and giving people context. That's why, the old saying that sit down, tell me all about it, you joke about, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's because people have pain. Classic example, if somebody was abused by their mother or the father, right? Somebody who's skilled in cognitive therapy can go to the point of pain and they can give the person context. Well, your father did that because their father did that to them. Mm-hmm. So it increases their level of empathy and compassion, right? So other types of therapies are where they go to the physical body, contractions in the body. If it's in the body, they go to that point and they do some therapy and they release wherever their pain is, they go and release. Mm-hmm. If it's an energy therapy, well, they go to where the contraction energy is, which is one of the things I can do as well. I can actually do some energy alchemy. I can go into your bioenergy, find out where the contractions is, and we could actually release it. It's going back to the point of pain.
Mm-hmm. That would be therapy.
Therapy, right? To get relief, right? When you are mentoring, quite often it's from someone who's been there before you. And they can give you advice, they can give you examples, they can give you great questions, they can hold space for you, they can sit in the mud with you, right? Because they've been there. And you respect them because you see them as someone that's further down the road than you. Coaching is like having an adventure buddy who goes with you, but doesn't tell you what to do. They may say, hey, look over there. What do you think of that? And then you said, hey, I want to go that way. So they go with you. Hey, is this where you want to be? Well, no. Okay, well, where else could you go? Let's go over there. Okay, we go over there. So coaching, you're going with people and you're giving them tools and insight. Hey, you want to break that? Here, hey, try this hammer. Oh, that didn't work? Hey, I'll give you a bigger hammer.
I see.
Right? Coaching is really a way of equipping people for the journey, right? Giving them tools. I use whatever tools are at my disposal. That's why I'm not a sports psychologist, right? I am a core performance dynamics. We use some sports psychology stuff like visualization, affirmations. We'll use a little bit of the quantum physics that now all there ever is. Every possibility exists there, right? Space, time, zone, all that kind of stuff. We use the law of attraction. If you want something, you need to become that person that can attract and be that person. If you want to be a millionaire, do you have the habits and preparation every day to show up and walk and act and be that person now, so that you can vibrate at that level, so you can attract the abundance, because success is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Can you repeat that sentence?
Success is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. The opportunities are always in the moment. They're not in the past, they're not in the future. It's always here. If you're not prepared, you may not even see the opportunity, or you may not have what you need in order to take advantage of that opportunity. Right? So if you're a hockey player and you haven't practiced your shot, and all of a sudden you got a wide open net and the puck comes to you and you shoot and you miss because you don't have the skill of accuracy.
You didn't work on your skills to be prepared for the moment, when the moment comes.
Correct. If you are looking for someone to be your partner and you haven't done the work on yourself, your wounds from past relationships, you haven't maybe established a career, you haven't become that person that you want to attract, and that person comes into your life, but you're not ready, that opportunity will go by.
Yeah, it's gonna walk away probably because this person is not ready.
Yeah, because you and we know people that in our lives that we've had, and maybe we've had a lot of connection, but the timing wasn't right. Right? What's that song by? I forget that group. It's a Canadian group called Bad Timing. It's anyways, it's idea that you meet somebody, but it's not the right timing. Well, timing has to do with preparation, right? And part of your preparation is also you have to create your success posse. You know what the word posse means?
No.
In the old days, when the towns used to get robbed, right? The bank robbers would come, they'd get robbed the bank, and they'd take off. Well, the sheriff and the deputy, there was only two of them, so they would gather all the townspeople, and they'd gather a posse.
Oh, okay.
Right? They gather different people with different skills, so we can go get that money back and bring those people to justice. Well, nobody succeeds in isolation. We succeed in collaboration. We all need a success posse. We all need people that we could be vulnerable with, that we can go for advice, that we can go for emotional help, for physical help, whatever. We need to have our own posse, because we can do fear by ourselves.
Yeah.
We can even be courageous by ourselves. In other words, we could feel the fear and do it anyways. But to be brave, that's what my son taught me. And there's an acronym for brave. Bold, where you're willing to take risks. Resilient, when you get knocked down, you get back up. Authentic means being real. Vulnerable means you're willing to be seen as not perfect. And then engaged, energetically, consciously, in the moment. Brave. We need others to be brave. And so that's how it actually works, right? It's that we are social beings. That's why we had this need to be seen, heard, and have a sense of love and belonging. Right? And what happens is that we're getting to the point where people are thinking they're getting that from social media, but it's really just an imitation. Right? It's not the actual technology that's the imitation. It's like you can't blame your laptop because of social media.
Yeah.
It's just a laptop.
Yeah.
Right? It's the people behind there.
Yeah.
Right? During COVID, I've used Zoom to connect with other people from all over the world, because I was not allowed to go to a lot of places because I was one of the non-compliers. Right? I wasn't allowed to go watch my guys play hockey when they came into town. I wasn't allowed to go to a restaurant. I wasn't allowed to go to a gym, but yet I still had lots of socialization because I've done a lot of my work via Zoom.
Via Zoom. Yeah. How much can we blame to what happened in our past for the actions that we're, taking in the present. And I'll explain myself. I understand that some people, probably went through the horrible situation. They were born, I don't want to say in the wrong place, but they were born in a family, with a lot of pain and abuse, and I understand that. But sometimes without going that extreme, I hear, like it's very easy for us to justify, oh, I'm behaving this way because of my house, my dad, or my mom, blah, blah, blah. Because, if I go back a little bit to in the past, with my parents, for example, my grandparents, probably their parents, like we're super traditional. The parents or fathers, for example, the man was not allowed to show emotions in the past. And we're talking about barely like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We don't have to go farther than that. So doesn't mean that if I don't have emotions, I blame my dad. How much can we blame to the past, and how much we should blame ourselves for not doing our job and trying to learn and try to get better. What do you think about this? What is your response to that?
I think first of all we need to address the word blame, because blame is language from a lower level of consciousness, just like good and bad, right? Blame is not something that when you're looking at blame, you're making a judgment on something. And it's kind of like I was telling you about my son when he threw my phone into the bathtub.
Yeah.
Should I blame him?
Yeah.
Or should I blame myself for putting it there?
Knowing that can happen.
Yeah. So should I blame myself? Well, no, because I was focused on meeting his needs. It just was. And I think that our ego needs to have some kind of an issue. I love there's a couple of things as you were talking that kind of came up, right? Gabor Mate said something really interesting about trauma. He said, trauma isn't what happened to you. Trauma is what you believed happened and what it did to you inside. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of perspective. And when you are choosing to look at something for blame, you are choosing a perspective. And there are different ways of looking at this. One of them, when you see something and somebody has had some negative happen to them, a little bit of trauma, there's a thing called post-traumatic growth. And I think it's called the happiness psychology. I've heard about this where somebody has had some negative happen to them, they go on to create some awesome foundation in memory of that person or whatever happened, right? And yet other people will go and they'll fall into substance addiction or prostitution or right? It's really about perspective taking. And what's something really interesting, it's Carl Jung, who is the granddaddy of psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. His quote is that unless you make your subconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. So I'll say it again. What he said is that unless you make your subconscious conscious, it will dictate your life and you will call it fate. And what this means is that most people, according to the neuroscientists or how they like to explain it, is that our subconscious stores a lot of our memories in the form of feelings. That's why Maya Angelou would say, you'll forget what somebody said to you, but you'll never forget how they made you feel.
That's true.
So what happens, they say, is that how we end up being these reactive beings is because we'll feel something, then our mind will start to create, okay, I'm feeling angry. Oh, it's something that Ricardo said. And then I get angry and emotion, and then I'll react. right? Feel, think, and react. And what they say that when we do that enough time, we create a personality. And that personality, the choices from that personality becomes our reality. All that a lot of this, the help and the transformation industry tries to do is here's you got your stimuli and here's you have your reaction. What they're trying to do, what we're all trying to do is create some more space. So that instead of me thinking, okay, I'm feeling this, oh, I'm noticing myself getting angry. Is it really about Ricardo or is it about something that this is bringing up for me? Do I want to stay connected to Ricardo or do I want conflict right now? And all of a sudden, instead of stimuli, reaction, I now have a stimuli, space, and a response. That's all they're trying to do. And that's what elevating your level of consciousness and awareness can do for you. You could start to become aware of the programming, of your feelings from the past. If what's happening is here and your emotion's way out there, and it's not matching up, then that's why some self-inquiry can come in. And I love what some of Gabor Mate's, the idea of a compassionate self-inquiry, right? So I always teach, right? If you got a situation, stop, breathe, inquire. Is it really about what's happening right now? Okay, even if it is, do I want conflict right now? Do I want to, or do I want peace, or do I want to maintain connection right now? Right? Because we're not at the effect of life. We have something that a lot of other beings in this world don't have if we have the ability to make a conscious choice. We were given to that by our Creator. If you even look at the story of Adam and Eve, Eve got deceived by the serpent. Told her that you're going to be like God, you'll know right from wrong. Adam made a conscious choice. Adam figured out, well, she's the only one I got here, right? And so he made a conscious choice to disobey God. When God confronted him, he blamed it on God. He said, God, it was the woman you gave me.
It's her fault.
Yeah, if you right. So he's like the granddaddy of blame shifting. Adam was the granddaddy of blame shifting. But he made the conscious choice. He could have said, hey, Eve, that was not right. We were told not to do that. Let's not do that again. But he didn't. He loved her. Who knows? Maybe the loving was really good. Who knows, right? And you didn't have much options if you only had one girl. Who knows? But anyways, the point is that, yeah, we have the ability to make conscious choices. But the majority of us walk around and only make conscious choices 5% of the time in any given day.
Wow, that's so little.
We are under the illusion that we're making choices.
But we're not.
And think about this. And if that's what's happening, where is all the programming coming from, right? Fear. What happened 5 years ago? Fear. With fear, you can control people. Right?
I mean, that's been happening, for forever, right?
Correct.
Generations and generations and centuries.
Yeah. That's why there's more and more people becoming more aware, right? And when you have someone who's aware, they are curious. Because there's a difference between, in my eyes, between being skeptical and being critical. I don't know if this is true for everybody. I don't know. Critical is having a point of view that you're so right and you're going to do everything to defend it, and me being right has to make you wrong. Skeptical is I'm curious. This is true for me. I wonder if it's true for Ricardo, right? Because the thing about the critical, it works really good for a while until you ever seen that meme where there's a 6 in the middle And if you're on the bottom of the meme, you see it as a 9. I'm on the other side. I'm a 6.
Yeah.
Well, critical thinking, from my definition of it, falls apart then. Because I think I'm right, you think you're right.
Yeah.
Right? I've had couples who were both thought they were right, and they were, but they're no longer together. Because when you're skeptical and curious, I wonder why he's so convinced that the 9. Well, let me walk over there and see it from his perspective.
Oh yeah, it's a 9 actually.
Of course. And then I could invite you over to my side. Oh, it's a 6. Oh, we're both right and we're both wrong. Right? But in order to do that, I always say that in any given situation, the person that has the higher awareness has the greater responsibility. Because, it's example, if you were in a room and we turned off the lights here and we had 5, 6 people walking around sleepwalking, and it was right, and I was standing there and you were stepping on my toes, not who's to blame, who's responsible for my pain? Me. Because I could go turn on the lights and leave because I'm aware of what's happening. You're sleepwalking, right? So a lot of people are sleepwalking through life.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, but also be careful, because they always tell you what not to do to a person that's sleepwalking, right? Because some people, you go and try to wake them up, they will get angry with you. When I first started learning about that we're not our minds and this, I remember when I read Eckhart Tolle, I had a lady that I was talking to her about that. We are energetic spiritual beings, and she started to get overwhelmed. She said, "Can you stop, please?
Oh wow.
Because this is too much for me."
Too much.
Yeah. Like trying to, right? That's why these kind of conversations.
You think some people feel comfortable in their own pain, in their own, I don't want to say ignorance, but you know.
Once again, the neuroscientists often say that we're predisposed to what's familiar and what's predictable. The reason why uncertainty they're more afraid of, because pain is predictable. You'll get the pain and eventually it'll diminish, or you'll take a pill and it'll diminish.
It goes away.
Uncertainty, you don't know if that worst thing that you think is going to happen, and you don't know if you're going to be able to handle it. Right? We are predisposed to familiar and predictable. So somebody who keeps dating the same person, they keep doing that because it's familiar and it's predictable. We all love hellos. We hate goodbyes. Maybe the hellos are so great. I've met people that, when I was younger, guys that used to be like the players,
Yeah.
they loved the initial part of a relationship. And then they got what they want, and then it got boring for them because they enjoyed the chase, they enjoyed the conquest, but they didn't enjoy the commitment past that.
So they go and look for the same thing again. Oh.
And what's scary is when people do that consciously.
Oh.
Then they're predators. And there are people like that. There is good and there is evil in this world.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, you're right. Here, I have a couple of questions I ask at the end of my guests. Lifestyle and health, whatever that means to you. What's your number one recommendation to achieve what you think is a good balance in general for life? I know you gave some million points during our conversation, and I know this is going to be very hard to compress, but do you have any 3 tips or steps that we should follow to keep our mind, in peace, or have a good, healthy, in your case, a healthy mind?
I would say really explore your spiritual life. I do a thing called The Greatest Words Ever Spoken, a Zoom call every Sunday where all I do is I take a book of a guy that put all the words that Jesus spoke all into one book. I open it up to people from all over the world, and all we do is we read his words. And I tell people, I don't want money. I just want you to hear the words, and then you decide whether he was a crazy man off his meds, or he said who he says he is. And then you decide what you're going to do with that. You're going to go to church, or you're going to do whatever you decide, because we are energetic spiritual beings. And when you have a spiritual perspective, it's kind of like, when you fly in a plane and you're coming down. Have you ever come down in a plane and you see, before you get to a city, all the parcels of land make sense?
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
When you have a spiritual perspective, life makes sense. Right? That's number one. Number two, cultivate gratitude.
Cultivate?
Gratitude.
Okay.
Be grateful. Be grateful. The world does not owe you anything.
I like that one.
Right? Nobody owes us anything. Right? Even the Creator doesn't owe us anything. He created us. He doesn't owe us anything. And I think what's really important is to stop thinking that life is supposed to be fair. Because if life was supposed to be fair, there would have been no Christianity. Because him dying on the cross for people's sins is the most unfair thing to ever happen. And most of us get offended because I would never do that. Well, yeah. No, you wouldn't. Because you think that life is fair. We have a tendency to ruin our own joy because we have expectations of others that they don't have for themselves. And we take stuff so personal. Stop taking things so personal. Life is not as personal as we think it is, but we are responsible for more than we think we are. How we show up in any given moment affects our life experience and other people's experience of us. That's the second thing, right? Third thing, create some rituals and routines. Every day, this day that we have, is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We could come back here next week and still do this, but it's going to be totally different. We will never have this moment that we've been having ever again. It's an opportunity. I prepared. I brought my fancy hat, my shoes. I meditated. I prayed before I came. I made an effort, gave myself enough time before and after, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Right? So prepare. And then have rituals and routines. When I go meditate, I not only clear my mind, but I say the Lord's Prayer before I go into it, because I know meditation opens yourself up to a spiritual world, and I want to be protected. I acknowledge my child and let him know that Jesus loves him. I love him. I used to say that to him every day when he was in his wheelchair. Hey, Jesus loves you. Papa loves you. Mama loves you. Uncle Matt loves you. I used to say it in his ear. I still say it in my meditation because I believe that the only thing that is real, because we can't lose anything that's real. Love is real. It doesn't end. In the absolute, that's all there is, because God is love, the Bible says. So I know that me loving my son, wherever that is, he knows. And there's going to be a time where I'm going to be connected to him again. So I don't ever cry tears of loss anymore. I cry tears of joy. But I had to grieve for 4 months. So have rituals and routines every day. The reason I meditate is because I need to reset. Just have you ever gone to Apple and you think there's something wrong and then you just turn it off and on and here, it's nothing wrong with it. Well, we've been 70,000 thoughts per day, right? So do you ever create some times of stillness in your life where you give yourself permission not to think, right? And breathe and move. Move. We're supposed to move, right? And the other thing is build relationships. We're social beings. You don't have to build tons of them, but have one or two people that you talk to on a regular basis. You'll never feel alone if you have that.
That's a good advice.
Yeah, that's it. That's as simple as I can make it.
Okay, so that was a great 3 tips or advice. And do you have any recommendation of what not to do in our life so we don't poison ourselves?
So that we don't poison ourselves. Can you kind of clarify that?
Okay, just to make sure we don't create that negative energy, and the negative thoughts.
Well, I think what you can do is just go, just take the Don Miguel Ruiz 4 agreements. Don't take things personal, right? Don't make assumptions, right? Always do your best, right? And if you begin with those 3, right? Those would really go a long way. And then the 4th, which is actually the 5th, right? There's one other one, but be quick to listen, but be skeptical, be curious.
I like that.
And also remember that what's really important is that when you're in a situation, Anthony Robbins always says that our quality of lives will be determined by the quality of questions we ask ourselves. Become inquisitive not only of other people, but ourselves. Right? Don't let your ego decide that you know it all. Right? Because everything I talked about today, there's a big perhaps.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because perhaps it's true to you, perhaps it's not. I don't know. But it's to my best of my ability and my perspective, right? So yeah, just don't wear life like a compressed Under Armour shirt, but like a loose kimono.
Okay.
Allow yourself to have a little bit of movement to move.
A bit of
right?
space there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. I love it. I don't know if you're interested. We put some of your information, so somebody wants to reach you out, or we can put in the description. How to reach you out. Yeah. And thank you so much for all these 2 hours. This is almost like a real podcast, eh? Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming here. Okay, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
Well, you know what? Whenever you want to do it, I'm open to it. I know some of the stuff is just, like I said, some of the stuff I like the deeper stuff. The stuff that fascinates me more is the stuff that that happens in the moment, right? Because that's unscripted. That's how life is, right? We don't know what life's going to bring, right? So that's the fun stuff, right?